Well, hello, my spookies. Tonight, we're leaving the highway behind, slipping past the last porch light, and wandering into the places where local legends still breathe. A pond keeps its dead like secrets. A backwoods county waits for the moon to rise and the beast to remember its hunger. Somewhere in New York, the night cracks open with punk rock, bad decisions, and something far worse than a hangover stumbling in from the stars. And just when you think you've found shelter, an old house opens its door and invites you inside, where every hallway seems to remember someone who never really left. These are the kinds of stories talked about on docks after midnight, traded in parking lots after the show, and muttered by one old-timer in town who swears it's all true. So, settle in, keep a light on if you must, and listen closely, because tonight the water is watching, and the woods are waiting, and every creaking door sounds a little too much like an invitation. And while you're creeping a little closer to the dark, make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app, because every Wednesday there's always a brand new scary story waiting for you here on Weekly Spooky. Now, let's begin. The Spirit of Langley Pond by Charles Campbell. Summer, 1981. Elena Ann Sanders swam for all she was worth. She could hear the echo of her mother's sentiment in her mind. Don't get into any trouble. Call me if you need me to come get you. No questions asked. Elena wished she had listened to her mother. Instead, it was nearly midnight, and she was swimming for her life to shore. Elena was beginning to think she was going to make it. She was going to see her mother again. The crack of a gunshot was the last sound Elena heard before the darkness of the water claimed her. Langley Pond was going to be her grave. Summer, 2021. Langley Pond had changed quite a bit in the last 40 years. Being billed as the largest pond in North America, it was nearly the size of a lake. No longer were clay mudslides used as makeshift boat ramps. Now, there were full-fledged paved boat ramps descending into the water. There were designated picnic areas spread around the shoreline, along with a few cabins that were rented nearly every weekend. It was almost 10 o'clock at night, and the humidity of the day still hung in the air. Brianna Turner glanced at her cell phone. It was 82 degrees. Ugh, I can't believe how hot it is, Brianna said. She peeled a strand of sweat-stuck hair from her forehead and grinned at her boyfriend, Andy Spires. Andy smiled back and said, "Yeah, it was over 100 today. Thought we might get a little relief by being near the water and all. Guess not. At least we have the cabin with the window unit. That's a plus." "You're right. That's a plus," Brianna agreed. They both turned toward the woods when they heard snapping twigs and shuffling feet. "Hey, Frog, y'all catch anything?" Andy asked when he saw Frog Spradley and his girl of the week, Jenny Coggins, clear the tree line into their sight. "Had a few nibbles, but nothing big. Threw 'em all back," Frog said. Jenny smiled, but she didn't look all that happy to be traipsing through the woods. "Good thing we brought beanie weenies then," Andy said. Jenny gave him the "you can't be serious" look, and Frog replied, "Damn, man, you are a lifesaver. Beanie weenies are the shit. I thought I'd have to break out the Vienna sausages and saltine crackers." "Hey, Jenny, You want to go in the cabin and cool off? Brianna asked. Yes, Jenny shouted. It was hot, she was sticky, and if this excursion with Frog taught her anything, she was definitely an inside girl. The boys watched as the girls walked into the cabin. Okay, Frog, where'd you find that one? Andy asked. Frog gave him a sneaky smile and sheepishly shrugged his shoulders. Come on, man. I don't recognize her. She ain't one of your usual valley honeys. She's from Martinez, Frog whispered. Why are you whispering? She can't hear us out here. What in the world were you doing in Martinez? And how'd you get her? She looks too sophisticated to be stomping around Langley Pond. Especially with you. The Prince of the Valley. She don't know nothing about the valley, does she? Andy asked. Well, she does now. I told her about the Spirit of Langley Pond, Frog replied. You didn't. And she hasn't left screaming? Not yet. Maybe it's because her phone died while we were fishing. She seemed more interested in whatever was on Instagram or Facebook than catching a catfish. Inside the cabin. Oh my God, that AC feels fantastic, Jenny said, and stuck her face in front of the window unit. It was turned all the way up, and Jenny's sandy blonde hair blew behind her like she was riding on the back of a motorcycle. Yeah, it's the only cabin out here with one. Andy sprang for the extra $60, said it would be worth it to sleep in comfort, and he ain't wrong. It's sticky as hell outside. How long you and Frog been seeing each other? Oh, I just met him yesterday. Where are you from? You ain't from the valley. Valley? What's the valley? Jenny asked. You're in it, Brianna answered and continued. You know that main road you took to get here? The one that went through a bunch of little bitty towns? Yeah, Jenny replied, and turned to face Brianna. Brianna was grinning, and her brown eyes were gleaming. Jenny really paid attention to Brianna for the first time, and she had this country girl pretty thing going for her. She looked like she could be fun in the sack, but could kick your ass out of it if necessary. Well, that road is 421, and 421 is the valley. Rednecks for as far as the eye can see. And you got yourself what we call a valley prince. That right. Why is he a valley prince? He's a Spradley, and Spradleys have been around the valley for as long as anybody can remember. Everybody calls him Frog. I don't even know if that's his given name, but I know his daddy was called Frog, and his daddy's daddy was called Frog. They own several businesses in the valley. His brother Ricky owns Valley Video. His other brother Johnny owns Spradley's fill-in station in Langley. His sister Darnell, well, she owns a beauty shop in Gloverville named, can you guess? Spradley's Beauty Shop? Jenny asked as she shrugged her shoulders. Yep, nailed it. So if you're from the valley, you know who the Spradleys are. Oh, really? That's good to know. So what do you know about this spirit he was telling me about while we were fishing? He didn't tell you about the Spirit of Langley Pond. Please tell me he didn't try to scare you with that story. Brianna suppressed a chuckle. He did, and it did freak me out a bit. Is there any truth behind it? From what I've heard, these local legends start with a grain of truth somewhere, and that grain grows and gets exaggerated over the years. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Am I wrong? Should I be afraid of a ghost in the pond? Jenny asked. Brianna smiled and motioned for Jenny to take a seat in the living room. Yeah, I know about the grain that started the story. It was something that really happened about 40 years ago. It went something like this. Summer, 1981. It was Friday morning, and Elena bid her mother farewell for the weekend. Her mother's voice issued a lifeline as Elena walked out the door to meet her boyfriend, Dustin Hines. Don't get into any trouble. Call me if you need me to come get you. No questions asked. Elena told her mother not to worry and that she would be home on Sunday night. Hey, babe. Dustin said as Elena hopped into his Ford pickup. She leaned over and gave Dustin a quick kiss before she pounded the dashboard, which meant it was time to burn rubber. Dustin pulled out of the driveway and beelined to Belvedere Clearwater Road. Finally! Elena shouted. She was ready to have a weekend alone with Dustin. They had been talking about it for the better part of 6 months. Elena leaned her head out of the open window to feel the wind in her face. Hey babe, watch out for telephone poles. You don't want to get your head knocked off. It would really, put a damper on the weekend, Dustin said as he tugged on Elena's arm. Okay, I'm just excited, that's all. I know it's just Langley Pond. Just Langley Pond? Just Langley Pond? You know it's the pride of the valley, Dustin said. He looked at Elena with his blue eyes, and he could see her melt, just a little. You're laying it on a little thick there, ain't ya? Everybody knows Richardson's Lake is the pride of the valley, she said, enamored with her man. I beg to differ. You can't put a boat on Richardson's Lake, and I really don't know how they can call that tiny mud puddle a lake anyway. Langley Pond should be a lake. I mean, it's as big as one. Speaking of boats, Elena interrupted, does your daddy still have that John boat at Langley Pond? He does, Dustin smiled. Trolling motor? In the back of the truck, Dustin answered. Sweet, Elena replied. The pair rode in silence for the next 9 minutes. Elena hopped out of the truck as soon as it rolled to a stop just inside the confines of Langley Pond. I can't wait to jump in the water, Elena screamed and shed her clothing as fast as she could, revealing her bathing suit underneath. Dang, girl, you ain't gonna wait for me to put up the tent? Dustin asked the air. Elena was already splashing in the water. Dustin set up the 2-person tent and pulled the trolling motor from the back of the truck. Elena swam to shore when she saw the tent was all set up and the trolling motor was attached to the John boat. Hey babe, we gonna do some night fishing? The bass should be popping top water plugs tonight, Elena said as she took a seat in the lawn chair set outside the tent. I reckon we can do that. Mama packed up some ham sandwiches in the small cooler and I got Pabst in the biggin. I love you, Dustin. Shut up, you do not. You just want me for my money, Dustin joked. The couple ate sandwiches, drank beer, let their food and drink settle before they made clumsy love in the tent. Elena fell asleep with Dustin's arms wrapped around her. She woke up 5 hours later, alone. Dustin? You outside? Elena asked as she rubbed her eyes and stretched. She shuffled out of the tent and heard the frogs croaking their night tunes. The crickets returned a symphony of their own. Dustin! Where you at? You know you can pee in front of me, Elena shouted. She looked around and was comforted that the truck was still parked in the same spot, so Dustin didn't decide to go on a midnight snack run and leave her out here all alone. But he didn't answer her, and that was a reason for concern until she saw the light from the flashlight out in the middle of the pond. The John boat wasn't there. That sorry sack of potatoes, Elena shouted. Dustin, get your ass back over here and pick me up. She hollered into the night toward the light of the boat. The light flashed in her direction, but the boat didn't move. Don't make me swim out there, Dustin. I swear I will, and I'll make so much noise that no fish is going to bite for the rest of the night. Don't test me. Elena was leaving playful and moving into pissed off. The light flashed in her direction once more, but the boat still did not move. Okay, I'm coming. Elena sloshed into the pond and began swimming toward the boat. The boat still didn't move. The longer she swam, the angrier she became. He better not dare ask for sex the rest of the trip, is what she was thinking. Not even a hand job. The light still shined like a beacon from a lonely lighthouse. Elena was about 30 yards away from the John boat. when she realized something was very, very wrong. There was a figure standing in the center of the boat. A figure that was a mite bit shorter than her boyfriend. That was their John boat. But that wasn't Dustin. Elena swam a little closer to see if she could make out who it was standing in the boat, and screamed in horror when she saw what the man was holding in his left hand. It couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of joke. Her mind was telling her someone was just pranking her. The man in the boat swung his left arm up, around, and launched the severed head of Dustin Hines in Elena's direction. She waited what seemed like hours on the sound of the splash, and when the sound came, Elena turned around and swam for all she was worth. Elena felt as if bricks were weighing her down. The burning in her lungs felt like she inhaled lit gasoline. She could hear the echo of her mother's sentiment in her mind. "Don't get into any trouble. Call me if you need me to come get you. No questions asked." Elena wished that she had listened to her mother. Instead, she was swimming for her life to shore. Elena was beginning to think she was going to make it. She was going to see her mother again. The crack of a gunshot was the last sound Elena heard before the darkness of the water claimed her. Langley Pond was going to be her grave. Summer 2021. Jenny's face was flush when Brianna finished the story. "Was that true? What you told me?" she asked. "Pretty much. I don't know if that's exactly how the conversations went down, but the facts are Elena and Dustin went to Langley Pond. Dustin's head was chopped off. They found the body in the boat, and Elena had been shot in the head. It took them a while to find her body, though. Longer than it probably should have. They say her body was in the pond long enough for her spirit to be trapped here. Some people say they can hear splashing around and hollering sometimes. Me, I think it's just the bass having their late-night snacks. They can make quite a ruckus when they're attacking frogs, lizards, and whatnot. I wouldn't let it scare you too much, though." Brianna finished and patted Jenny on her hands. "Did they ever catch the guy that did it?" Jenny asked. "Well, that's the thing. They did. That's how we got this story that's been passed down for 40 years, but he was shot in the head with a long-range rifle as he was escorted to the courthouse. Let's just say the police didn't spend a lot of time looking for the killer of Billie Jean Morris. From what's been passed down, a lot of folks think it was set up that way. The police can turn a blind eye sometimes when it comes to valley justice, especially when it's a couple of local kids that were killed. Kids that everybody knew. Kids that everybody loved. There were some rumors that it was Elena's daddy or even Dustin's daddy. They were both avid hunters with rifles to do the job. They weren't even questioned. I don't blame either one of them if they killed Billie Jean. He deserved it," Brianna finished. Jenny looked at her in all seriousness and said, "What if Billie Jean didn't kill them? What if someone else did? And what if that someone else is still around?" Jenny asked, clearly working herself up into something that Brianna thought was silly. "Calm down, girl. It was Billie Jean. I know it was Billie Jean. It's a valley thing. You wouldn't understand. Now let's go see what those boys are up to." Frog was grinning from ear to ear as he saw the girls approach. Andy was downing another PBR. "I was beginning to worry about you two. You get your girl talk in?" Frog asked as he grabbed his own PBR. "Yeah, something like that," Brianna replied and winked at Jenny to let her know it was okay. It was just a stupid local legend. Nothing to worry about. "Frog, are we really having beanie weenies for dinner? I mean, I'd rather go to the store and grab some sandwich stuff. Maybe Brianna and I could run to the grocery store real quick. We'll get a bag of ice and some more of that beer y'all like." Frog was all set to disagree and force the beanie weenie supper, but when the B word came up, he changed his course of thinking. "I think that'd be okay. What do you think, Andy? The girls can go get the sandwich stuff and another case of beer. I'll contribute $10 for the cause, Frog said and pulled a crinkled bill from his well-weathered leather wallet. Yeah, I reckon that'll be okay. Brianna, take her to the Bilo where Jimmy works. He'll let you buy the beer with no ID. Brianna rolled her eyes at Andy like she didn't already know that. She had bought beer at that Bilo since she was 14 years old. The Valley kids knew where to go without being ripped off. There was always the quick shop option where the owner would only sell the swill known as Milwaukee's Best for triple the labeled price to desperate teens. That's the only way he could get rid of the crap, and he had to carry it because it was such an under-the-table moneymaker for him. Any way he can stick it to the government and help raise the next generation of Valley rats, the better for his Valley pride and his pockets. Andy tossed the truck keys to Brianna. Be careful, babe. Don't wreck my truck and don't get caught with that beer. Brianna gave him another eye roll and trotted to the driver's side. Jenny felt a wave of relief when Brianna started the engine and the cool air from the AC kissed her face. Andy, Frog said with a wicked grin. Yeah? I had Jenny going pretty good with the Spirit of Langley Pond. You want to have some fun and scare the girls when they get back? More Jenny than Brianna. I know she's tough to scare. I don't know, man. That new girl might go off the deep end. I mean, you don't know her all that well, and it'll severely reduce your chances of playing hide the snake, if you catch my drift. It'll be more like a whack-a-mole, Andy replied and smiled. I don't care, Frog began. I don't think she's going to give it up anyway. May as well have some fun with her. She's creeped out over the ghost of Elena Sanders. First, what did you have in mind? And second, if Brianna gets pissed, it's on you, Andy replied. Look, while they're gone, I'm going to go to the edge of the woods over yonder. Frog pointed to the shoreline at his left. You see that cluster of trees over there? Yeah? Well, I'm going to go over there behind them trees and start tossing some of the red bricks that Ricky put over in that clearing into the pond. He'll never miss 'em. He done forgot he put them out there. And check this out real quick. Give me a second. Frog ran to his car and Andy could hear him rustling before he came trotting back with a palm-sized speaker. It's a Bluetooth, man. I'm going to play some Halloween screams out of this bad boy. It works right off my phone. And while you're doing all this shit, where am I supposed to tell them you are? Tell them I went to the other side of the pond to go gigging. Brianna will believe that. She knows how much I love to go gigging. And when she finds out that's a lie, then me and my right hand are going to be best friends for the rest of the trip. I don't think so, Andy replied. You have to take the fun out of everything, man. Look, I will tell you that I was going gigging and I'm going to disappear for a little while. Then you won't be lying and you can act like you're just as pissed as the girls. I suspect I'll be taking Jenny home after this stunt and you and Brianna will be all alone in the cabin. Frog grinned and poked his finger through the hole he made with his other hand. A smile ran across Andy's face. Now that sounds like a better plan, my man. I know nothing, I see nothing, I hear nothing but the spirit of Elena Ann Sanders splashing and screaming in the water. That's the spirit, Frog replied without realizing the pun. Darkness was closing in on the valley when Andy saw the lights of his truck coming down the path. They're back, he shouted, which sent Frog scurrying for the tree line. Brianna and Jenny were still laughing from their conversation on the trip back. Hey girls, need a hand? Andy walked toward them. Where's Frog? Was the first question from Jenny's lips, and Brianna already had her doubting eyes looking around for the mischievous valley prince. He'll be back directly. He went gigging on the other side of the pond. What's gigging? Jenny asked, thinking it was some made-up thing by these valley people. He went to kill his namesake, Brianna answered. Gigging is when you basically take a 3-pronged metal spear and go stab frogs with them. Don't worry, though. Frog isn't killing them entirely for fun. He'll cut the legs off and fry them up. Ew! He's going to eat their legs? Jenny couldn't believe what she was hearing. Yeah, I'll probably eat some too. Andy, though, he's not much on frog legs, are you, babe? Brianna asked. Y'all can have that. If I eat a fried leg, it better have belonged to a chicken, that's all I'll say. Did he say when he's coming back? Jenny asked. Well, with Frog, you never can tell. If he starts sticking them left and right, it might be a while, but if he can't catch them, then he might not be gone so long. Is he good at catching them? Jenny asked. Best in the valley, Brianna replied. Oh, Jenny said. She thought that was a hell of a way to treat your date. Send her off to get your beer while you go kill frogs around the pond. Jenny made up her mind that Frog would have to take her home as soon as he got back. Here's your beer, Brianna said, and pulled the case from the bed of the pickup. It's still cold. Jenny and I are going to make ourselves a couple of sandwiches. You want a ham and cheese? You know I do. Can you bring it back out here? I'm going to start a fire in the pit. It's 80-something degrees out, Andy. Do you really want to make it any hotter? I like to see the people in the flames, babe. I won't keep it lit all night. Alrighty then, go see your flame people. Come on, Jenny, I'm starving. The girls went into the cabin. Andy lit up the fire pit and waited to hear the first splash. Brianna came out 10 minutes later with Andy's sandwich wrapped in a paper towel. Did Frog really go gigging? Brianna asked. Andy truthfully answered. That's where he told me he was going, but you never know with Frog. He added that just to cover his ass for when the shit went down. All right, it's pretty dark out here now. You coming in soon? Yeah, I'll be in a little bit. I was trying to wait on Frog to get back. I'm surprised he didn't come running when he heard the beer truck, Andy said, already thinking of how fake mad he was going to be with Frog when the prank unfolded. Andy wondered if Frog would let him get a punch in just to completely exonerate himself from any involvement in his childish ploy. Just put that fire out before you come in. We don't want to be the ones to burn down the cabins. Roger that, Andy smiled and pursed his lips for a kiss. Brianna gave him a quick peck. 15 minutes passed and there was no splash, no sound from the area in which Frog disappeared. Andy was getting a little antsy as he stood from his chair, took another gulp of PBR, and turned toward the cabin. He could see the outline of the girls standing near the AC unit. Andy began walking toward the cabin when the first splash finally came. Ah, so it begins, Andy thought to himself. The girls didn't hear it, or if they did, it wasn't enough ruckus yet to make them come outside. Then there was a second splash, much louder than the first. He saw Brianna's head turn, but she didn't come outside. I guess third time's a charm, is what Andy thought. The third splash came, and it was much louder than the first two. This time, he saw Brianna move toward the door. Then came the scream. It was loud, shrill, and brief. Almost inhuman. It was a scream of severe pain. Brianna came bursting out the door. All right, Andy, tell Frog to cut the shit. Jenny's freaking the hell out in there. She's afraid to come out. Frog, cut the shit! Brianna hollered in the direction of the commotion. There were more splashes. They got louder and closer. Louder and closer. Then, the second scream. It was so loud, Andy was thinking that was one hell of a speaker Frog had brought. Andy and Brianna heard running, and it was coming toward them, very quickly. Frog emerged from the darkness, and his face was white as a sheet. Frog, you son of a Brianna began and then stopped. Her heart felt like it was going ba-boom out of her chest when she heard the next scream. This was no Bluetooth speaker. This was menacing, and so full of pain. Damn, Frog. How are you doing that? Andy asked, still not getting it. Actually impressed with his friend's skill. It's not me, Andy. It's Elena. And I pissed her off. Stop it, Frog. Take me home. I'm done with this shit, Jenny yelled. Her entire body was shaking. The poor girl was scared out of her mind. I think we all need to leave, Andy said as he realized his buddy wasn't joking. Andy kept calm. Let's just go. We'll come clean up our crap in the morning. There was another tremendous splash, and it was closer than any of the others. The rhythm was almost like thunder followed by lightning. A few seconds after the splash, the screech came. It was a sound of unmitigated pain. The four of them froze in place, and their mouths fell open, almost in unison, at what they saw next. The apparition of Elena was floating above the water just past the shoreline. The front of her head was busted wide open, and her eyes were contorted black pools that looked in opposite directions. She fell into the water with a loud kersplash, and slowly rose again. Her mouth opened wide, and this time the scream pierced them. The eardrums of all four of them were on the verge of exploding in their skulls. Hands went to cover ears on instinct, but it didn't matter. This scream moved through flesh and bone, through space and time. This was the scream of the dead trapped in her watery grave. It was a macabre dance of the dead in which Elena was forever trapped. Jenny was the first to speak when the screaming stopped. "She's not going to let us leave." Brianna looked at Andy, and they felt the same apprehension that Jenny spoke aloud. But Andy simply said, "Let's get the hell out of here." Andy and Brianna ran to the truck while Frog and Jenny ran to Frog's Mustang. Andy turned the key and heard the clicking sound associated with a dead battery. Frog did the same. Jenny was shaking in her seat. Brianna was already thinking that they would just book it to 421 on foot. It wasn't that far away, and once they were on that stretch of road, they would be home free. The wind suddenly picked up and the temperature dropped. The four of them got out of the vehicles and moved closer to one another. Brianna wanted to scream, wanted to tell them to run, but something in her gut warned her that would be a big mistake. Jenny's lips were quivering with fear, and Frog didn't look like a prince at all. For the first time in his life, Frog truly felt fear rush up his spine. The calmness that Andy displayed just moments before was replaced with a feeling of despair. They all felt like Brianna, felt as if they should run, but couldn't. Not that anyone or anything was stopping them, but it just felt like a very bad idea. There was another screech, and the four of them turned toward the pond. The apparition was floating above the water just at the shoreline. Her dark hair was flowing behind her, and she wasn't falling this time. Her mouth was contorted as if she were about to release another screech, but this time, she didn't. The spirit of Elena looked directly at Frog with a face of recognition. The spirit began shaking above the water. "What the fuck, Frog?" Andy whispered. I don't know, man," Frog whispered back. She's pointing at you," Jenny said on the verge of sobbing. "No, she's not. She's pointing at us. She don't want us to be here, and I think we should give her what she wants," Frog whispered back. Andy, Jenny, and Brianna slowly stepped away from Frog. Elena's spirit kept pointing to the Valley Prince. It was recognition, and it wasn't coincidence. "What the hell, man? What did I ever do to her?" "I don't know, man, but I wouldn't make any sudden movements if I were you." Summer, 1981. He had seen Elena come in his store through the years. He longed for her, but she was taken. Dustin Hines was her man, and it didn't sit well with him. Not one bit. He heard it through the grapevine that they were going to Langley Pond for a romantic getaway this weekend, and today was Friday. Elena wouldn't give him the time of day, would barely utter a word when she came in to pick out a movie. Sometimes Dustin would be with her. She would come in with her beautiful long black hair and perfect smile, teasing him. Elena had to know that he was in love with her, but she would come in with Dustin flaunting her love for him and, in a sense, a disdain for Frog Spradley. He didn't understand why. Valley Video was going to be his outright in another year. He would be a reputable business owner. Frog was sure that the video rental business would be a necessity for generations to come. But she would come and go, tease him, taunt him, show him what he can't have, show him who was getting her love. This wasn't going to work for Frog. He would be at that pond tonight, just like the song said. Bang, bang, he shot me down. Bang, bang, I hit the ground. Bang, bang, that awful sound. Bang, bang, my baby shot me down. And that's exactly what Frog would do. He would go to the pond. He would hear them making love in the tent. He would take his machete and get Dustin to come outside while Elena was sleeping. He'd hack him up and chop off his head. He'd take the John boat out late. He heard them talking about their late-night fishing trip. She would come out. She would see the light. She would think that her lover was fishing without her. She'd see the man that she scorned. See what she could have had. He would toss the head of her betrothed. She would see him. All she had to do was keep swimming to the boat, and she would have lived. But she turned and swam away, afraid of the man that was truly meant for her. He'd line her up with his deer rifle. Frog was a dead shot. He wasn't going to miss. He'd let her feel as if she may get away before the shot would zip through the back of her skull. It was pure luck that they pinned it on Billie Jean. He always had a short fuse, and that was all very well and good with Frog. He'd find another love, one that would love him. They'd have a baby boy, and he would keep the name of Frog alive. Frog was the spitting image of his father and his grandfather. He'd grow up as a valley prince. Frog Sr. wouldn't think of Elena again until he took his final breath in 2015, when the song floated through his mind for the first time since that day. Bang, bang, he shot me down. Bang, bang, I hit the ground. Bang, bang, that awful sound. Bang, bang, my baby shot me down. Frog died with his loved ones around him and tears in his eyes. His family didn't know. The tears weren't for them, but for Elena, the spirit of Langley Pond. Summer 2021. The specter was transfixed on Frog, and he was in turn locked onto her lifeless eyes. Her mouth curled in pain, and it was as if she were the one seeing a ghost. Frog couldn't move. It was as if he were stuck knees deep in mud, and the air around him was infused with a coldness that chilled him to his soul. The spirit of Langley Pond seemed to know him, and she didn't seem all that thrilled that he was looking at her. "Oh my God!" Brianna screamed in Frog's direction. "She knows you!" Andy turned away from the ghost and saw the angst in Frog's face before he said, "That's impossible. There's no way she knows Frog." The ghost floated closer to them and seemed to put her feet on the ground. The entire shoreline got much colder, and the others felt it. Everyone was stuck in their spot, afraid to make any sudden movement. The four of them formed somewhat of a straight line, and they all faced the spirit of Elena, but that spirit was only focused on one of them. And she changed. The life came back into her eyes. They turned from black pools to light brown. The distortion in her face also melted away. The ghostly apparition that the four of them witnessed floating above the pond changed into healed flesh and blood. She no longer floated but walked toward Frog. He managed to utter the first words to break the silence. Hey, look, what do you want from us?" The young woman smiled at him and held out her hands. Frog wanted to believe this was just a dream, that he had drank 5 too many PBRs and would wake up any minute, but he knew that he was in the here and now. Take my hand. You were there. You killed my boyfriend. You chopped off his head. And you shot me, Elena said and continued. Take my hand so I can leave this God-forsaken place. Frog trembled. His brain was trying to fight the overwhelming compulsion to grab Elena's hand. If he did, he thought it might be the last thing that he ever did. Brianna found her courage and spoke. Elena! The girl turned to face her. He couldn't have killed your boyfriend or you. Please, just listen to me. Elena placed her hands at her side and gave Brianna a sense of relief. She was going to listen to her. Good. Look, the year is 2021. You were killed in 1981 by Billie Jean Morris. It was in all the papers. My mama told me about it. The whole town knew it was Billie Jean. He was shot dead, Elena. They got the man that killed you and your boyfriend. Elena turned her attention away from Frog for just a moment and walked to Brianna. Jenny ran to Andy and stuck her head in the crook of his arm like she was trying to shield herself from seeing a kill in a horror movie. Elena walked toward Brianna. She seemed to admire the beauty of the girl. They were close to the same age. Billie Jean Morris did not kill me. Billie Jean Morris never talked to me. I know who I saw. And it was his face, she said, and pointed back at Frog. Shit, woman, I wasn't even born yet! Please! Frog pleaded. It was him, Elena said, and started to turn away from Brianna. Brianna lunged forward and grabbed Elena around her wrist. She was surprised that she didn't pass through her. Brianna really had a grip on the young woman. Elena spun around in Brianna's backwards hug like a slippery eel and placed her hands on Brianna's head. The memory of that night and her death filled Brianna's mind in what felt like a wave of electricity. Brianna blinked rapidly. Andy pushed Jenny away and started to run toward his girlfriend. No! Brianna screamed. Stop! Andy stopped in his tracks. Elena looked into Brianna's eyes, looking for understanding. You see, it was him. You see that now, right? Elena broke Brianna's grip around her waist and turned back to Frog. What the hell, man? I wasn't even on the planet then! It was his daddy, Brianna shouted. This made Elena pause. It is 2021. His daddy's name was Frog, and his name is Frog. He looks just like his daddy. He didn't have anything to do with it. Andy rushed to his girlfriend's side, and Jenny was right behind him. The three of them stood together. Frog was still frozen in place. Elena moved closer to Frog. She could see the man that chopped off Dustin's head. She could almost feel the bullet break open the back of her skull all over again. He put his hands out in front of him, hoping this would keep her at arm's length. She touched his hand, and it was colder than anything he had ever felt in his young life. You have his blood, and a penance has to be paid, Elena said as she grabbed the Valley Prince by the hand. I will not stay here any longer. I was waiting on him to return, and he never did. But his son will do. You carry the blood of the man that killed me. You should have never been born, Elena said, and pulled Frog closer to her. Brianna and Andy started to run toward them. Jenny was a blubbering mess. To save their friend, but it was too late. Elena had a firm grip on both of Frog's arms, and she morphed back into the specter. Frog was lifted straight up into the sky, his legs kicking and his lungs screaming into the night. Brianna and Andy shouted Frog's name as he disappeared into the sky. His screams went silent. Andy and Brianna looked at one another, waiting for another sound, another sign of life from the Valley Prince. What they heard in the far distance of the pond was a splash, a cackle, and then silence. The spirit of Elena Ann Sanders was now free. It was replaced by the son of the man that killed her and Dustin. This would be the penance that set her free. Brianna, Andy, and Jenny would never be able to explain what they witnessed. They just said Frog went giggin' and never came back. What else could they say? Alien Zombie Punks from Upstate New York by Dan Wilder. Why is it so dark in here? Damn it! I just hit my head on a ceiling? Wait a minute. I think I'm dead. Let's see if I can piece this thing together. We went into the city earlier. It was me, Sloppy Suicide, or Ricky, as he was known before last year, Debbie, and myself. We strolled around the city streets, which were both 10 to 20 degrees warmer than the streets of the nowhere mountain town we left 3 hours earlier, but also inexplicably smelled like chocolate-flavored breakfast cereal, which was strange but better than the leather mill runoff that usually tickled our noses with its award-losing scent of sickly sweet putrescence mixed tenderly with chemicals that were most likely banned everywhere else in the free world. Anyway, earlier our punk rock asses clambered into Sloppy's busted-up conversion van with bags of snacks and beer and began the long drive to the Big Apple. It was already snowing steadily as we tore down the roads leading to the highway entrance that would bring us close to our ultimate destination, Max's Kansas City, for a likely to be unforgettable night of punk music and New Year's revelry. But the chains wrapped securely around the van's tires kept us thankfully on the road no matter how dicey the weather was. Apparently it was in part forgettable because piecing this shit together is getting harder. But I digress. So we walk around, got buzzed, Debbie bought a few trinkets from the street vendors, and eventually we wandered our way over to the venue. After arriving and stepping gracefully over a disturbingly large puddle of puke, we stepped inside. The place was wall-to-wall punks, bullshitting, drinking, being charmingly rude, all of our greatest qualities brought out in mass. We mingled, we drank, we were loud, and soon the opening band lurched to life. I can't for the life of me remember their names, but they sang fast, aggressive songs about alienation, indiscriminate fucking. There might have even been a television cover in there. They were quickly followed by more scruffy, snot-leaking bands that played 40-song sets in the space of 20 minutes apiece. So far, so worth it. The night wore on, but soon the headliners took the stage, coming straight from the wilds of New Jersey. These folks looked for all the world could tell like ghouls returned from the dead to raise unholy hell, and they were louder and more confrontational than all the other acts combined. Wait a minute, ghouls. That triggers something to fire off deep within my brain. The scream started from the back of the club, but it was barely audible over the din of the band and the crowd cheering them on. Occasionally the band's bass player, a hulking dude with long black hair brushed in front of his face, would smash his instrument into anyone foolish enough to dare to get on stage. Onward they played, bringing us chain gang choruses and 3 angry chords all wrapped around tales of the Kennedy assassination, teenagers from outer space, and satanic werewolves. And subtly, the crowd noise became less and less. I have no idea what compelled me to turn around, but I did. Then quickly regretted it. In the front of the house, someone, or more accurately, something, moved among the crowd swiftly. The being's eyes reflected light not unlike a dog or a cat, which was disquieting enough for sure, but the fact that it was seemingly murdering patrons left and right was undoubtedly its worst feature. I turned back to warn Debbie S. and Debbie, but another shadow being had torn them to pieces before setting to work on the band, who admittedly fought like leather-clad berserkers, but no amount of leather-clad muscle and violence could stop the creatures whose numbers had now swollen to 4. Upon seeing this, I did the only sane thing I could think of. I ran the fuck out of there. I pushed through the throng, slid constantly on barf blood and Lord knows what other bodily secretions before I burst out onto the city street. The heavily falling snow made everything seem like a Christmas card-worthy winter wonderland, but the sky held less enchanting prospects. Far above the skyscrapers, meteors streaked across the sky, leaving violet trails in their wake. I ran on, passing various New Yorkers, staring uncharacteristically in shock as feet away one of the meteors hit the sidewalk, splitting it violently. One of the shadow beings rose from the smoking rubble and immediately attacked a bystander, sending a geyser of blood up into the frigid night sky, the resulting crimson rain freezing to red ice as soon as it collided with the ground in steam-hissing droplets. Shit. Why is this happening? I thought stereotypically as I tore ass on and on without a destination and no other motivation than saving my narrow ass from getting ripped a new one from astro monsters falling from the heavens. A few blocks down, things got much worse. I saw one of the shadow creatures attack a woman, but amazingly it didn't finish her off before it bounded off after a faster-moving victim that ran like a fucking cartoon character over a sheet of ice before regaining his footing and speeding off into the night. Against all common sense, I made my way over to the woman to try and help her. But upon arrival, she was a complete and total mess that looked more like a plate of discarded spaghetti and red sauce than a young lady out for a stroll. Please just hold me, she whimpered. I did, immediately soaking my best t-shirt in blood. What's your name? I asked, mainly because it's what I saw characters do on TV when they encountered similar, deeply shitty situations. Olivia, she muttered weakly. That's a great name, I said unconvincingly. So, what brings you out tonight? What the hell kind of question was that? In response to my quandary, her eyes glazed over cataract white. Suddenly, she sat up straight and shoved me back hard, sending me directly on my ass. A hiss escaped her now blue lips, which were flecked with neon green phlegm. Her gums had retracted to the point where her teeth now appeared ginormous. Speaking of teeth, she began clicking them together rhythmically. Somewhere behind me, I heard a slight commotion, which quickly grew in intensity before a group of... What the hell are these things? Zombies? Yeah, let's go with that. A group of zombies spilled forth from a nearby bodega, their limbs flailing wildly as they moved both fast and clumsily forward. I screamed and possibly peed a tad and booked it like a freight train straight out of hell. I ran until my lungs burned from the freezing air. Then I made the absolutely idiotic decision to stop for a sec and get my shit together. The zombies were on me before you could say George A. Romero. I felt no pain, but darkness soon took me. I came to for the briefest of seconds. The sound of unearthly trumpets filled the sky, and as soon as they arrived, the creatures formed back into meteors and rose into the sky as the strange music became more and more like sirens. Blackness came for me again. And then I woke up to even more blackness and a minor head injury from the aforementioned ceiling. I stared into the darkness before my eyes finally settled on a sliver of light down by my feet. I slid forward on my back and pressed my feet towards the light. Damn. Whatever I pushed up against was cold. Cold, but very forgiving. A door opened, letting harsh, fluorescent light smash into my eyes with wild abandon. I pushed forward and immediately fell onto the rigid tile floor. It took me about 3.7 seconds to realize where I was. The morgue. I looked down at my now bare feet and removed the manila tag that was tied around my big toe. I have no idea what had happened to me, but I was definitely not dead. I caught my reflection in a nearby mirror mounted on the wall. I wasn't a zombie either. Then I saw the two forms rise from the gurneys behind me. Rick, Sloppy, whoever, and Debbie sat up. They were nude minus the thin sheets that covered them, but Sloppy's mohawk was unmistakable, since it was hot pink with electric blue tips. It took a minute, but I could tell they were much the same as Olivia from earlier in the evening. But their faces seemed downright friendly instead of, menacing as could possibly fucking be. You guys look like shit. Thanks, pal. You look naked. I hadn't noticed it before, but Sloppy was right. I was every bit as naked as my friends. But where I was shivering from the coldness of the room, they seemed to be as cozy as could be. My eyes darted around the room for something to cover up in, and then they fell on a plastic bin filled with my clothes, wallet. Hell, even my beat-to-shit Doc Martens were accounted for. I crossed the room and pulled on my clothes. So, what's new with you two? Well, we were ripped apart by aliens and woke up as zombies, but, doesn't feel too bad, Debbie said cheerfully. You guys don't want to eat me? Not particularly, no. Turn me into one of you? Nope, Sloppy said flatly. Well, what do you want to do? We sat at Max's drinking our stolen beer. Just me and my two naked zombie pals. The walk back was uneventful. This particular area of the city seemed completely abandoned. Only corpses remained. Occasionally we'd hear noises of happy crowds from deeper within the city, or footsteps close behind us or from the rooftops. But if more creatures prowled tonight, we sure as fuck didn't see them. The entire thing was very Omega Man, to be quite honest. But as previously mentioned, one with less monsters for a change, so that was a big plus. Anyway, a punk and two naked zombies walked into a bar. No punchline. We just walked in, stole beer, and sat at a table surrounded by corpses on a chilly New Year's Eve night. Hell, as hard as it is to believe, the new year had already begun a few hours ago. Probably between the time we were eaten by monsters and waking up as either, one, a guy that obviously fainted at the prospect of being eaten when in fact some cosmic twist of fate called the herd home before said eating could take place, or two, as monsters that behave absolutely nothing like monsters that made them who, in turn, were made from other monsters from space. It makes perfect sense if you're drunk or mentally ill, or a combo of the two. So we sat and drank and laughed as if absolutely nothing was off in any way. It was kinda perfect, to be honest with you. So now what? What? I mean, you two can't exactly go back home again unless everyone in your family... Fuck that. If the whole damn town was suddenly stricken blind... That's kinda mean, but totally true, don't you think, Rick? Debbie asked, a little string of neon green phlegm/drool escaping from her mouth as she spoke. It does make sense. You're not going to correct her for calling you Rick? After being dead, I don't know. The nickname seems tacky now. It's not just now, kiddo, Debbie countered. Rick flipped her the bird playfully. I think the first thing we should do is assess just how far this thing spread. The rest of the city seems okay, but here, you'd think there'd be emergency crews or something, I said, looking for a TV or radio we could use. I finally located a small transistor radio behind the bar and switched it on. Only static filled the air no matter what channel I tuned to. Well, so much for that. Rick got up and wandered around the room for a minute. I think we have to consider something else, he said solemnly. Which is? Those things will be back. You can bet on that. What makes you so sure? Debbie asked, her white, pupilless eyes staring blankly. Why come all this way, rip shit up for under an hour, then just piss off back to whatever demented homeworld could spawn Space Invader rejects that turn people into zombies, most of which are hungry for human flesh, except when they aren't, like me and Deb? That seems like a solid assumption. Maybe this was like a dry run, test shit out, see how it goes, Debbie said quietly. I'd say it went swimmingly with the exception of you guys. What if we are the desired result, and the others were failures? Rick offered. No offense, but naked zombies that are no different than regular humans other than looks seems like an experiment created by an asshole convention, or just by someone that has next to zero common sense. I mean, they're aliens, presumably. Maybe their standards of intelligence are vastly different from ours. As logical as anything else that's gone on tonight. Debbie, can I talk to you in private for a moment? Ricky asked, sounding more like an adult than I've ever heard him before. Debbie and Ricky crossed to the opposite end of the room. They stood silhouetted by the stage lights that remained on. I couldn't help but wonder what in the hell was so damn important, but I didn't have a long time to contemplate as soon as they returned to the table. So, listen, man, me and Deb were just talking, and we have a proposition for you. Is this going to get weirdly sexual? Debbie and Rick laughed until they coughed up more green goo that hung tenaciously to their cold, blue lips. No, it's more like dinner plans. Spill it. Let's say, for instance, that those cosmic creeps make a return engagement tonight. Do you think your chances of continued survival are greater or lesser given your current state? Obviously, to be like you would help, but I'm not too keen on joining the ranks of the shambling dead. We move around just fine. And we're impervious to the cold, Deb added merrily. That's all well and good, but say I agree to this. What makes you so sure I won't end up like the others? Because we aren't like that. And we'll both bite you. Better your chances that way. And then what do? Hide out. Maybe gather some weapons. If they think we're on their side, we may be able to just walk up and pop them before they know what hit them. I truly hate it when you make reasonable arguments. Is that a yes? I mean, back home is comfortable, but I can't help but think I have a greater purpose in life than being a counter jockey at a video store. Saving the whole damn planet would definitely qualify for that. Fuck. All right, I'm in. Debbie barely let out an excited yay before the biting began. When I woke up, I felt nothing. No more cold, no more warmth. Thankfully, no hunger. Eventually, we gathered some supplies, clothes, and made our way back to our van. Soon, we were headed due west as we exited the city, which, besides the few blocks we spent the night on, seemed perfectly normal in every single way. For now. We sat under the hot desert sky just outside the trailer we had shared for over 14 years. We sipped lemonade from glasses adorned with various sci-fi flick characters more for nostalgia than anything, since we no longer required any food or drink whatsoever. As the years wore on, we became less and less sure our intergalactic enemies would ever return, but since we basically just hung out and watched TV and made music, it really didn't matter much. Until the day that changed. The saucer hovered low in the sky before releasing 3 meteors that collided with the desert floor. 3 shadow beings crossed the sand. We drew weapons we've never fired and prepared for what we guessed was coming. Except what came was vastly different than any scenario we'd imagined over the years. The beings held out their smoky hands and our weapons vanished. "Didn't plan on that," Ricky whispered. Then the largest of the 3 spoke to us. "Hey folks, we just want to say sorry for the trouble we caused you as children. We've done some serious growth since then and realized how childish our prank was, but we were just young punks." We all looked at each other with our cataract eyes, and it finally all made sense. The anarchy, the chaos. We, as punks, held those beliefs dear. And so did our brothers from the stars. I cracked some beers and handed them to our guests. "So, what bands are you guys into?" The Wolf of Fagan County by David O'Hanlon. Maybe Whistler was a nice town once. It seemed that way until the summer of '86. The old folks always whispered about certain places, about the places you don't go and the boogeymen that dwelled within. Everyone in Fagan County knew a local ghost story. Back then, I loved to hear those stories. Nowadays, not so much. My dad trucked crops from the farms into the neighboring states of Louisiana and Mississippi. I didn't see much of him. He left before dawn and got home after sunset. The day before my 13th birthday, he took a load to Shreveport. I awoke to a stack of used horror comics the next morning with a note that read, "You're old enough for the good ones now, soldier." I loved the way those pages smelled. After all these years, I still have a couple of them in the suitcases I live out of. I'd read through the entire bundle in a week. I flipped through them and found the one I'd enjoy the most for a second visit when my mother called from downstairs. "Connie, come quick!" she shouted. I hated when she called me that. It was bad enough being named Conrad. The effeminate nickname caught on with my friends in second grade, and then with the rest of the student body by the end of recess. Something sounded off in her voice as I trudged down the narrow staircase that descended into the kitchen. Mom was sitting at the table with her elbows pressing into the vinyl top, and her hands hiding her face. My sister, Lisa, had her head down, shrouded in her arms. Her body convulsed as she bawled noisily inside. I held my breath all the way to the table. No one spoke to me as I slid the chair away from the edge and eased my way into it. Mom reached over and put her hand on mine. "Something terrible's happened," she whispered. Something terrible had happened a few weeks ago, too, and a few weeks before that. We'd discussed both of those events as a family. No one was crying then. Sure, Mom had been shaken up by the discovery of the first body, but it seemed like nothing to worry about. We all knew Old Man Megara from around town. He would pop out like a magician's rabbit to grump about what a bunch of slack-jawed hippie spawn all the kids were whenever you least expected it. The police said it was a heart attack that took him, and that coyotes took to eating his remains. Grotesque and unseemly as it were, my folks delivered the news to my sister and me with just the facts and reminded us to stay away from the woods. Coyotes rarely attacked people, but Dad said there's something different about any animal, including man, once they got a taste for blood. The second time we were called to the table, it was clearly more bothersome. Mom wasn't handling it well, but she remained calm as she told us about the bodies found along Country Road 63. A couple of teens gone to make out got cut up real bad. Chief Hardesty said it was just a freak occurrence, a crime of opportunity, and that the killer was likely long gone. Our parents told us to be home 30 minutes before sundown after that, and to never go anywhere alone, just in case. This time was different. "Connie," she started, tugging at the silver locket dangling from her thin neck. Her voice trembled. "It's Brenda." My stomach nodded. Brenda Knowles had been Lisa's best friend since kindergarten. She'd babysat for me on a few occasions and came to eat dinner with us every Wednesday. She was my first crush, too. I sniffled, but held back any other reaction until Mom could finish. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe those old Tales from the Crypt comics were poisoning my imagination the way Father Dean said they would at youth service. Maybe she was just moving away. That would explain why they were so upset. "Chief Hardesty found her this morning," Mom continued. "Nope, it was exactly what I thought it was." I don't remember the exact moment that I realized the killings were exactly 1 month apart. But I do remember Lisa raising her face to stare at Mom and then me in turn. Her lips quivered, and then she stood up fast enough to knock the chair to the floor. She slammed her fists onto the table and screamed. That I'll never forget. That look. And those words. She was eaten. Lisa cried until she passed out that night. I watched the news with Mom to see if the police had anything to say. The station's newest reporter, Rex Willits, looked like he'd been sick as he raised the microphone close to his chin. His hand shook slightly and his trademark smile was nothing but a thin line of white teeth below his bushy mustache. Rex nodded slowly and started his report when the phone rang in the kitchen, and Mom went to answer. "I'm here at the Ridley Funeral Home in Fagan County to report on a grisly, unimaginable crime," Rex started. He swallowed hard. "The body of 15-year-old Brenda Knowles was found just before dawn this morning. Brenda had been babysitting for family friends the prior evening. She started the short walk to her home just before 11 p.m. I turned my attention to Mom's shouting in the kitchen. "What do you mean 2 days, Paul?" she growled. "It doesn't take 2 damn days to get a mechanic." Dad's truck broke down. That happened a lot when he was hauling rice to Shreveport. Only then, though. Mom noticed, too. She had a pretty good idea of what was going on. "What about the kids?" she wailed. "You know what's going on here. You're leaving us alone so you—" Her voice became muffled and I scooted closer to the television to hear what Rex had to say. I heard the phone slam against the receiver several times and Mom stomping up the steps. "I've seen the body. My God in heaven, I'll never unsee it now," Rex said when movement caught his attention. He snapped his fingers and pointed his cameraman in the direction of the police chief. Other reporters rushed in around him. Rex elbowed one of them out of his way and reached in with his mic. "Don't you buzzards have anything better to do?" Chief Hardesty barked. "A child's dead, for Christ's sake." "How?" Rex asked. "How did she die?" "Violently," Hardesty answered in his low, gruff drawl. "Is this related to last month's double homicide?" a woman asked. "We don't have conclusive evidence linking the two this early in the investigation," Hardesty said. His shoulders sagged. "There are similarities." "Were the other victims missing flesh and muscle?" Rex quizzed him. "Were there bite marks on them as well?" Hardesty glared at Rex, and then spoke with forced restraint. "At this time, I'm asking all residents of Whistler and the outlying areas to stay indoors at night. The curfew is merely a request, however." The wail of sirens cut the report short. We wouldn't find out until the morning that they'd found another body. Crazy Dolores lived in a shack on the edge of town. She sold herbal remedies and told fortunes for $1. No one knew how long she'd been dead. I climbed into bed, but didn't dare go to sleep. I opened a comic and thought about Dad. Maybe the rig really broke down, but I didn't buy it. He was spending time with some woman, in a strange way that made me feel better. He was more worried about getting laid than he was about the killer on the loose, so maybe it wasn't a big deal. My door creaked open, and Lisa slipped through the gap. I laid the comic down. I didn't know what to say. Sorry your friend was brutally murdered and partially eaten really didn't seem like it helped the situation. Then again, We're going to find Brenda's killers wasn't a winner either, but that's exactly what Lisa said as she leaned on my dresser. I gawked at her and waited for what felt like an eternity for her to say something else. "Look, Connie," she started, then paused and chewed her bottom lip. "Chief Hardesty is a scumbag. He's going to pin all this on the first person that ain't Baptist enough for him. Then the murderer is just going to drift away." I was still too young to know how common that sort of thing was around there, or what kind of man Baxter Hardesty really was. I did want to make sure that Brenda's killer got caught, however. "The killings are about a month apart," I said, hesitantly, unsure of exactly what I'd discovered. I shrugged. "What if the killer travels and just stops through here every few weeks? Or lives here and returns home once a month?" Lisa offered. "Dad's friend Ted is a long-haul driver." I remembered. Ted tried to convince Dad to work with him all the time. I also remembered Ted coming to my birthday party. I shook my head. "I'm pretty sure he's out of town right now." I scratched the 2 recently sprouted hairs on my chin. "What about a delivery driver? Brown's only gets a few deliveries a month." Lisa thought it over and nodded. "Okay, we'll go by and see when they got a delivery." Thinking the conversation was done, I lifted my comic. "What is that, Connie?" Lisa asked shakily. "What are you reading?" I closed the issue and looked down at the cover. Bright yellow eyes stared up at me above the fangs dripping blood over a broken skull. I looked up at my sister. I knew what she was thinking, and I wanted to tell her that she was stupid. I wanted to. But I didn't. The same thought hit me when I looked at those fierce yellow orbs on the black cover. My stomach pitched as I thought about the recent events. My eyes left the stare of the beast and met my sister's. "It's a werewolf," I finally said. We tried to put the notion back into our imaginations where werewolves were supposed to stay. Lisa and I rode our bikes to Brown's General Store just past noon. The curfew officially started at sundown and was no longer a request. Not that it mattered, the streets were already deserted. The baseball cards sputtering in the bike spokes signaled the arrival of Brad Breaker. Brad was between Lisa and myself in age, so he hung out with both of us. He was the definition of cool with his acid-wash jeans and his torn midriff Bruce Springsteen t-shirt. Brad could play guitar. And football. He was also muscular, with aquiline features and sandy blonde hair that made him look like Patrick Swayze in Red Dawn, and made Lisa's brain stop working. My mom spazzed when I said I was leaving. Brad looked at the grocery store and turned back to us. "But you said it was an emergency." "You won't get in trouble, will you?" "Nah," Brad shrugged. "My old man said experience builds character, and that I needed to bring back more Folgers." "Lucky this is our first stop," I said. "So why are we here?" Lisa looked to me. Telling him our theory would have been the right thing to do, but she thought he was cute and hoped I, being closer to the childish age to believe such things, would do it for her. I did not. "We want to find Brenda's killer," I said and waved at the street. "Everyone's scared to death, but we want to help." "Why?" Brad asked. "I mean, why do you think you can do it faster than the police?" I removed the wrinkled, somewhat neatly folded newspaper clippings and handed them to him. "Mr. McGarrah died and his corpse was eaten by coyotes. That's what they say anyhow. There's been a killing at the same time every month since. Each of those victims was partially eaten as well," I said, rattling off the facts as quickly as I could. "I think the killer comes to town once a month. We think the murderer might be a delivery person or a truck driver, so we want to ask the Browns if they've gotten any shipments this week," Lisa added. "Gnarly," Brad nodded slowly. "Let's get to work." The Browns deliveries turned up bupkis. We checked with every business in town for the same results. That theory was as dead as Brenda, which left us with only one other possibility. 7:15, we stopped by the ice cream shop and got sundaes for a quick sugar rush before dinner. I debated sharing the werewolf idea. I'd been trying to dismantle it as we asked around. If it was a werewolf, why'd the killings start only recently? Was anyone acting differently around town? Was anyone new? What made someone a werewolf? So many questions, but none of them ruled out the possibility. What if... It's stupid, Brad said, staring up at the now full moon. What if it's a werewolf? Lisa choked and stared at me, wide-eyed over puffed cheeks full of banana split. I mean, my pops tells me to stay away from Snyder Creek because some kids died back in the 1920s. Everyone says that was a monster. Why couldn't this be one? Darn it! I snapped my fingers and scooted my chair back with a screech of steel feet against the sidewalk. Why didn't I think of that? Think of what? Lisa asked. I've heard that story too, I answered. The Snyder Creek ghoul. They never found out what really happened. Lisa, we need to go to the library and see if we can find any old papers about it. Not a chance, Connie. She pointed at the Sherbert skyline. We need to get home before dark. It's a long ride. The library's probably already closed anyway, Brad offered. The cops are never going to believe us, Lisa said. After tonight, he'll just be a man, I reassured her. We'll have a month to find out who the werewolf is and prove it. Crap! Brad let his head hang, most non-triumphant. What? Lisa and I asked in unison. I forgot the coffee. He put a foot on a pedal. I'm going to hustle to Brown's. See you later. He wouldn't. Brad's body wasn't found for 6 days. Worst of all, strange as it sounds to say it like a bad thing, he didn't get eaten. It would be a while before Lisa drew a startling conclusion from the fact. The curfew started an hour earlier after that. A citizens' patrol was organized as well. It wasn't much more than a dozen yokels with spotlights and guns driving the paved roads, however. They wouldn't go down the miles of gravel paths where there weren't any streetlights to keep them safe. They didn't find the werewolf either. All they accomplished was shooting a drifter who was busking at the Crispy Chicken truck stop. Chief Hardesty tried to pin the murders on that poor soul like Lisa had suspected he would. No one was buying it. By that point, Dad had decided that between the new woman and a monster running roughshod back home, he had all the reason he needed to move to Louisiana. He came while we were asleep to collect his things. We spent every day tracking down information and investigating whatever absurd idea came to us. It was 2 nights before the next full moon when Lisa told me her troublesome theory. He didn't eat Brad because he was warning us, she said somberly across the table. The local library had few books on lycanthropy. We'd been reading them every night and comparing them to the 2 clippings we had from 1926, when the Snyder Creek ghoul had struck. I put the piece of paper I was using as a bookmark between the pages of the tome and closed it. What do you mean? I whispered. We were asking around about delivery schedules, about people from out of town. She shook her head. The wolf isn't a stranger. We know him. And he heard us talking. He wants us to leave him alone. I checked my watch and reached under the table, wrestling with the zipper from my fanny pack. Then he shouldn't have killed our friends, I growled. I pulled my prize and set it where Lisa could see with a heavy thump. Her eyes widened at the sight of cold blue steel. Dad forgot it when he packed, I told her, and lifted the St. Christopher medallion our aunt had given me for my birthday. I've got this and $6 silver. We can make 2 or 3 bullets with that. We don't know how to make bullets. Otto Dickens does, I pointed out. We have time to get to his store and back home if we go right now. We're not hunting this damn thing, Connie. Lisa stood quickly and looked around at the mostly empty library. She lowered her voice. We should stop this. If he killed Brad to scare us off, then he knows who we are. We need the bullets regardless. Her face twisted with contempt. She knew I was right and scooped her backpack before heading to the exit. We rode our bikes to the fork in the road, left to our house, or right to Otto Dickens' gun shop. Lisa didn't speak as she leaned and pulled her Schwinn down the right-hand street. I smiled softly and followed. Most families in Whistler had lived no further away than the county line for generations. Otto just seemed to appear one day. Despite what you might have heard about Southern hospitality, it doesn't apply to strangers. Otto had an uncanny ability with firearms, however. Small towns of rural Arkansas might have hated strangers, but they certainly loved their guns. Otto was soon a welcomed member of the community and set up a shop on the far side of town, a couple of miles past the old cemetery. The tarnished bell over the door announced our arrival with whatever the hell a bell's version of a smoker's cough is. Otto looked up from the reloading station, his face twisted with curiosity as two teens entered his tiny store. A long scar parted his wild white beard on the left side of his face. He held up the cartridge he was working on between his thumb and index finger. "Best goddamn rifle round in history," he said in a voice that sent a shiver racing up my spine. 45-70. I kept the chopped-down Winchester in this caliber for clearing tunnels. Can't hear much of shit anymore as a result, but it could turn old Victor Charlie inside out in those confined spaces. You ever shot a man? Lisa and I exchanged bewildered glances. How many kids could say yes? Didn't think so. Otto deposited the finished cartridge into a cardboard box beside him. Well, what can I help you with then? Too early for hunting. Not what we're hunting, I said. Lisa elbowed me in the ribs and cleared her throat. You can make bullets, right? Reckon I can. Lisa held out her hand and I gave her the items from my fanny pack. Otto left his stool and prowled to her. He bounced the coins and pendant in his palm. His amber eyes darted from one of us to the other before he snorted. You want silver bullets. He set the materials on his counter and shook his head. That's a shit idea. Silver's too dense. It won't take the rifling. Unless you plan on shooting at a barn, you won't be hitting nothing from more than a few feet. Muzzle velocity with nosedive too, because the round is heavier than your powder load. You won't mushroom either. They'll go clean in and clean out. Shot shells. That's what you need if you're looking to use silver. Lisa looked at me, completely lost in the gunsmith's lesson in ballistic science. I didn't understand it either. We don't have a shotgun, I finally said. We have a Chief Special 38. A snub nose shooting silver bullets. Otto burst with boisterous laughter. Hell, you kids might as well slather yourselves in barbecue sauce and yell, "Here, puppy!" if you plan on fighting a werewolf with that setup. My jaw fell open, and I quickly glanced to my sister to find her in the same state. Otto put a hand on each of our shoulders. I hadn't noticed before, but 3 of his fingers were missing from the one resting on me. He hunkered slightly to look us in the eyes. Don't look surprised. Ain't much else you could be doing with silver bullets. He went behind the counter and pulled a sawed-off shotgun from beneath the register. My eyes drifted to the black tape wrapped around the walnut stock and the rough scratches where a serial number had once been. Reckon you can borrow this one. Going to take about an hour on the shells. You believe us? I asked. Lots of things in this world we pretend not to believe in no more. Pretend weren't real in the first place. He absently rubbed the scar on his cheek with the nubs of his fingers. We pretend until they start eating us. The sun was just an orange razor's slash by the time we got home. We dropped our bikes in the yard and ran inside. The shotgun mostly fit inside Lisa's backpack so we could sneak it past Mom. Not that it mattered. All the lights were off and she wasn't waiting for us like normal. I headed for the living room while she stashed the gun and changed clothes. How are you, soldier? A gruff, ragged voice asked from a darkened corner. The hairs prickled on the back of my neck at my dad's pet name for me. He stepped out of the shadows. He looked different and naked as he gracefully scaled the back of the couch and perched on the cushion. The weak glow of the mail-order torch lamps shimmered on the sweat-slick hairs growing longer from his tight flesh. His elongated nails scratched at the thick orange fabric of the sofa. "You can catch a lot from whores," he said. He spoke slowly, like each word was new to him. Long strands of drool slung from his mouth as he flexed his jaw with a series of loud, painful pops. "Your ma knew. Tried to fix it with crazy Dolores." His obsidian eyes focused on the coffee table. I saw Mom's locket sitting there next to the half-full ashtray, still wet with blood. "It's not just the bite," he grumbled, his words becoming deeper and more human. "It's like the clap. I brought it home. Made her. Mr. McGarrel was... accident." He shifted on the cushion. Things moved inside his body, bones and muscles realigning, and he whined like a dog in a sticker bush. He sprang over the table and landed inches from me. His nose twitched as he took in my scent. His lips didn't touch anymore as the fangs locked together. Stiff fur covered his once chubby cheeks. "She couldn't control," he growled. His teeth snapped in front of me.
"I can. Join. Pack. Become. Come with me, soldier."
I quivered with fear, with hurt, with anger. I never suspected my parents. I needed answers. Lisa screamed and broke me out of his hypnotic gaze. His hand clamped over my mouth. He watched the stairs, waiting for Lisa to come down. I eased my hand to the fanny pack, wiggling my fingers to stretch the zipper without the noise. "Connie?" Lisa called. Dad sniffed the air. I watched his pointed ear twitch. He whipped his head back around to me and his eyes widened as the barrel pressed against his chest. The .38 was louder than I remembered. The bullets weren't silver, but they did the trick. He fell backwards and crashed through the table. I fired the rest of them into his face while he was down. He screamed in pain behind me while I darted for the stairs. I slammed into Lisa, who was clutching the shotgun. "I think there's 2 of them!" I wasn't listening. I jerked the weapon from her hands and went to finish Dad off. Only, he wasn't there. 2 bloody bullets rolled in the debris of the coffee table. A shadow fell over me from the kitchen. I threw myself to the floor, narrowly dodging the swipe of my father's claws. I rolled onto my back, and he looked more monstrous than before. His face had contorted into a snout. The front window shattered, startling me. My finger tensed on the trigger, and the silver buckshot tore through Dad's thigh, obliterating the wood paneling beyond. I clambered up the stairs, and Lisa pulled me to my feet by my collar. We ran into our parents' bedroom and slammed the door behind us. I screamed when I saw the body on the bed. It was Mom, but just barely. Her features were still deformed, her body still covered in the bristly fur of her new form, and her head hung from the gnawed throat by a few remaining strands of muscle. Everything Dad tried to tell me suddenly made sense. His new girlfriend turned him, and he turned Mom. That's how the werewolf knew we were snooping. Mom was doing the killing, while Dad joined his new pack in Louisiana. I vomited at the foot of the bed. "What's happening?" Lisa asked. Downstairs sounded like a dogfight. Snarls, yips of pain, furious barks, things breaking. I threw the door open and whipped around the corner with the shotgun raised and ready. Dad pounced onto the stairs. Blood gushed from wounds, and he bared his fangs as he crawled up the steps toward me. I pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. I remembered duck hunting with him, and then my own folly. I hadn't chambered another round. He drew closer as I racked the slide, but it was too late. His claws opened deep furrows in my thigh, and I toppled backwards. Then the other wolf came into view. It grabbed my father's legs and pulled him down the steps before mounting his back. The beast howled victoriously and glared at me with amber eyes set in white fur. The monster clamped its fully formed jaws down on the back of Dad's neck. I heard the wet snap of the spine as it shook its head from side to side. I stared at the long scar, parting its fur, at the claws digging into its prey, and the missing fingers beside them. I pressed the barrel of the shotgun to the back of my father's skull and fired. The white wolf slunk away. Brain matter and pieces of skull clung to its fur. I pumped the shotgun again. And then, the beast was gone. By morning, the bodies had fully reverted to their human forms. Chief Hardesty didn't question anything. Dad was the killer, and Mom was just a victim. We let him run with that story. Before our aunt could come and pick us up, we needed to take care of one more thing. We rode our bikes to Otto Dickens' shop and found him assembling a pistol at his counter. "Reckon the police seized that gun," he said simply. "Yeah," I answered. "Sorry, I guess." I set my mother's locket on the counter and looked at the gunsmith questioningly. "Wolfsbane," he licked his lips. "It helps when you're young, when the moon is still your master." He finished the pistol he was working on and slipped it into a messenger bag. He pushed the kit over to me. "I haven't killed anyone in a long time, in case you were wondering," he told us. "What do we do now?" Lisa asked. "Different breeds of wolf the world over. My kind don't have a pack here." He pointed at the gauze around my leg. "Your old man's kind does. You took from them. They'll take from you. A wolf never forgets. You're just rabbits now, and there's nothing left to do for a scared bunny but to run." We took the bag Otto prepared for us and left his shop. We didn't go back to the house and wait for our aunt, though. We rode our bikes to the outskirts of Fagan County and hitched a ride at the Crispy Chicken. They caught up with us in St. Louis 3 years later. I buried Lisa behind a city park. I rest in one place until I hear the bays of the pack on those bright, moonlit nights, and then I disappear onto another stretch of asphalt, always moving, always staying ahead of the wolves, always ready to remind them that rabbits have teeth too. Ghost Story by A.N. Onimus. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was young. I was young enough to taste the adventure, but old enough to know better. I'm still not sure how this was real. Too much happened and was seen to be the fanciful imagination of being young. One thing is for certain. I have not forgotten what happened that night. And I am certain I never will. It was fall. The leaves were just starting to turn. The days were still warm and the nights were getting cooler. The county fair had been in full swing and was the last night it was open. I was there because a friend had talked me into going, and I wanted to sample some kettle corn and caramel apples there. I was waiting in line for the popcorn when we saw him. He was a boy about my age and my size. He looked like any other boy there, except his clothes were funny. He looked like he was dressed up in old-time movie clothes. He was looking at us. My friend nudged me and nodded in his direction. We exchanged looks and began to walk toward him. As we began to walk, to my surprise, so did he, directly for us, without looking away. When we were within speaking distance, I nodded and said, "Hey." He nodded back and said, "Hello, my name is Jonathan. I'm from here, but have been elsewhere for a while. I don't know anyone here now." I told him he could go with us if he wanted to. He nodded. We spent the next couple of hours riding the roller coaster, the Ferris wheel, and the tilt-a-whirl, after which I thought I might hurl, but I managed to keep things together. We had found a bench to sit. Jonathan and my friend were working on some red vines when he asked if we liked scary things. We looked at each other and said, "Of course," as if we would reply any other way. He asked if we knew where the house was, down on Oak Street. He said he knew the house that was spooky down there. I was hesitant, but after some encouragement from Jack, we were soon headed out the gates from the fair, into the night. As we made our way down through some neighborhood streets, it had really began to cool off, and there was definitely a chill in the air. A breeze was picking up, and a few leaves were blowing in between our feet as we walked. We were beginning to get far enough away from the fair now that I began to become uncomfortable with the distance, even though I knew where we were. It was just then when he said, "We're here." This had startled me as I realized we had all been walking in silence. A glance from Jack told me he was no more at ease than I was. I had this strange feeling of foreboding, and in retrospect, I know now that my survival instinct was trying to warn me. As I looked at him, he stood looking up at it. The house was huge. I can't believe I had never noticed it before. It was a sprawling 3-story mansion with what appeared to have been a large yard all around it. It seemed to be well kept, but everything about it repelled me. I looked at Jack and the other boy. Jack was looking around nervously. The boy, though, he had a radiant smile on his face. I noted he was actually breathing hard. I asked him if he was all right. He snapped his head towards me instantly while taking a step toward me. "Yes," he said, then slowly retreated one step back again. "What do you think?" he asked. Jack was barely audible when he answered. "I don't think we should go in if that's what you mean." "Of course we should go in. I know who lives here. They aren't there yet," he said. I agreed with Jack and voiced my concern with getting into trouble. "There will be no trouble. Let's just go," the boy said, and with that, he began to walk up the walkway to the front door. I thought the walk to that front door was the longest 25 feet of my life. Every step forward seemed to get colder. The darkness enveloped us, and the air seemed to become still. The repulsion I felt going forward was immense and progressive. I didn't know why I felt like this. I didn't want to seem scared, but I was, and I didn't know why, which made me confused on top of the anxiety I seemed to be becoming overwhelmed with. I was following the new friend of ours and Jack. The boy seemed to be bursting with enthusiasm and excitement as Jack and I trudged along. As we approached the steps up, I took hold of the rail and realized my palms were sweating profusely. I became aware of my own labored breathing. I looked to Jack, who mouthed "No" at me as we were almost to the top step on the porch. My mouth was dry as I thought of 100 reasons not to open the large front door, but couldn't utter a single word. The boy stood in front of the door and turned to look at me. He simultaneously reached for the knob and turned it. I yelled, "No!" as he did, but to no avail, as we heard the click and the door began to swing open. The door creaked and groaned in a way that sounded guttural as he swung it open wide. I could see inside into the middle of the room, but the darkness swallowed the perimeter beyond. "Come in," was all he said as he boldly stepped in without looking back. Without a word, Jack and I followed him in. The smell was overwhelming as we stepped inside. It smelled musty, earthy, and almost rotten, like a trunk that had been closed for years. I thought the windows looked broken out in places, but there was no air moving through the house now. I don't remember the door shutting, but I felt the uncontrollable urge to run, and I backed right into the shut door. Jack, in a panic, grabbed the handle and wrenched on it, but it didn't budge. He pulled with increased fervor, and I began to hit the door with my closed fist, and my hands began to tingle. I swung around to see the boy standing, looking at us, expressionless. A smile began to creep into the corners of his mouth. This twistedly sick look he began to have made the terror well up even more. As I began to scream at him, he suddenly turned and ran into the darkness, laughing maniacally. I followed a few steps after him instinctively until I realized that giggling, he ran down the stairs. Down the stairs seemed to be even blacker than the darkness that already left navigating nearly impossible. I turned to look at Jack, who was gone. I cried out in fear and frustration at our stupidity. Why would you ever go somewhere with someone you don't know? Yet here I am. Jack stepped forward into my field of vision and grabbed my arm. He began to sob. "What's going on? Where did he go? Why is this place so scary? What's going on?" I pulled him in and put my arm around his shoulder. "Look at me. We are going to get out of here," I said in as calm of a voice as I could muster. I looked to the side to a window and ran to it. I ripped the floor-length velvet curtains open and gasped to see a window. I looked next to me to see a small table and picked it up and banged it on the glass. I wasn't sure what was going on yet, but I wasn't fully committed to breaking out a window because I'm scared. This could be a prank done on poor taste. Fear overwhelmed my rational thoughts, and I swung it. It didn't budge, and I felt as though I were hitting stone. I was even more scared at this abnormal response. I backed up one step and swung as hard as I could to have the table splinter apart, with pieces smashing against the walls, floor, and into my head. I felt the point of impact to reveal on my head a spot of blood on my hand. The window appeared unblemished. As I frantically turned to see Jack crumple into a pile on the floor crying, "I want to go home." I grabbed his collar and pulled him to his feet. I went into the first open door I saw aside from the staircase. "That boy must be in on this. I don't know why he would bring us here, but you can be sure it's not good," I whispered as I pulled Jack along, who was now regaining his composure. The doorway opened into a large room. It appeared to be a library, as books lined the walls to high windows which must have been 3 stories tall, as there were balconies with ladders circumnavigating the room. I pulled us to one side as it seemed to offer a mirage of protection versus being in the room's center. I put a hand against the shelf and looked at the books. Most of the titles were in languages I didn't even recognize, some with what appeared to be symbols only. Breathing hard and looking around for the next move, I noticed there were mounted heads of animals surrounding the room. They were high above the books on the walls. Deer, bear, cougar. They did not have content looks on their faces, rather anger or fear. I looked to the next and found the animal to be beyond description. I stared at its cavorted face and studied it for a moment. It was unknown to me. I glanced ahead and found another unrecognizable head. Upon closer look, I gasped and nearly threw up. It was the head of what looked to be a person, but it had hair all over its face. Its simian likeness was unmistakable, yet it seemed more human. Jack was gasping at me, looking wildly in the direction I had been staring, yelling, "What is it?" He pulled at me to follow him, and I stumbled along. We came to a hallway with opposing doors. At the far end was a door with windows on either side. Long velvet curtains hung parted in the middle, showing the moonlight peeking through. We took pensive steps towards the first door, and I reached out to turn the knob. I cautiously edged the door open and peeked inside. It was too dark to make anything out visually, but I heard sounds. It sounded like some kind of animal was stepping in something wet and sludge-like. Grunting and labored breaths intermixed with ripping sounds came from somewhere within the room. A barely audible whimper was immediately stopped by a low growl. It was then Jack stepped back, and a squeak of the floorboard suddenly alerted whatever was in there. There was a rustling of something moving toward us, and I knew beyond any doubt that I did not want to know what was making that noise. I was able to get us out and slam the door before the thing could get there. Jack was whispering how badly he wanted to leave and clutching my arm in a near frantic manner. I was unsure if we should look in any more rooms or go try to escape from one of the windows at the end of the hall. As I was gathering my wits, I heard another moan. I thought it might have been my imagination, but Jack's face registered that he had heard it as well. "Was that the other boy?" he asked in a whisper. "I don't know," I replied as my voice broke. I had never and have not since known fear such as this. Sweat dripped off my nose, running down my neck and back. I was shaking and could barely speak. I had thrown up again after shutting that door. It just hadn't registered until now. I wiped at my face, and it was apparent I had not been aware enough to make any attempt to project it away from my body. I had a sudden recall that I had my cell phone. Funny how I had argued how I wanted and needed one with my parents and used the safety reason. How ironic, I thought, as I frantically dug it from my pocket. No service. As I thought my spirit couldn't drop farther, the date under the time seemed to be spinning, like a dial. I had no idea what had happened, but the realization it was broken almost made me cry. If we made it out of there, my parents would kill me for breaking it. I was truly terrified as the tears began to run down my cheeks. I was breathing fast and hard. My head was spinning like I may pass out. Jack's sudden grip on my arm again brought my attention back to reality. We must have been moving the last few moments as we were standing in front of the next door, which, unfortunately, was open. There was a shaft of moonlight coming from the window across the room, and it fell on two of the dirtiest, foulest dogs I had ever seen. My mouth fell open in utter shock at the putrescence of them. They seemed to have what looked like some rotting skin in places. One looked like it was partially disemboweled and something drug on the floor a short distance behind it. The first one lowered his head with a growl, and saliva, or something like it, dripped from the large fangs. It momentarily glistened in the little light present. The smell coming from them was nauseating. Sickly sweet rotting stench with sulphur-esque tones burned my nose as I immediately recoiled from sight and smell. The closer animal, if you could call it that, began to growl, although the sound seemed to emanate from the hole in its side. I pushed Jack ahead of me as panic again rose in me like a wave commanding me to run. In spite of the pathetic creature's aberrant appearance, they could move quickly. Their claws dug to gain purchase on the old floor, shredding with each foot strike. There were snarling, jaws snapping, making saliva fling and spray in the moonlight. Our complete terror must have been adrenaline-fueled enough, as they were nearly to the end of the hall before I realized it. There was a perpendicular hall at the end by the windows, and as Jack was slowing to make a turn, I heard the hounds had stopped or slowed. I turned to look, and they had stopped 20 feet back and were crouching down with tails tucked between their legs, whining, and were turning back as though they were afraid of something. I called to Jack as quietly as possible to get his attention without drawing further alert to our presence. We were stopped by the windows, and I looked out. My parents were walking down the street. My heart soared as I hit the window, screaming their names, completely throwing caution to the wind. They couldn't hear, and kept going as there was no way for them to know I was here. I was supposed to be at the fair. How sorry I was that I hadn't done as I had said. I was going to die in this house. I didn't know what this place was, but it was so much worse than anything I had conjured up as a haunted house in my head. I would have given anything to be with my parents right now. Safe. Not here in this terrible place, whatever this was. I looked down the hall, and at the far end was what looked like an old servant staircase, narrow and steep going down. Wanting to go anywhere but down, I looked the other way and saw a door at the far end, and doors on opposing sides down the hall. More doors made fear well up inside me again. The hair began to stand up on my neck. There was a faint crying sound that was slowly growing louder. Was it a child? A woman? Was it the boy? I couldn't tell, but as it grew louder and louder, it became more distorted. It was a mixture of crying that was morphing from a cry to laughter with choking intermixed. I had never heard a sound like that before, and if I never do again, it would be a blessing. My fear was already overcoming me, and this wretched cacophony was more than I could take. I began to pull Jack to follow me, and we began to run. We sprinted into the hallway blindly in terror. I frantically grabbed at doorknobs to open one, any one of them, in hopes to get refuge from this horror. The light was so low I could barely make out the shapes of the doors. The illumination was minimal, and the color of the walls and doors appeared to be various shades of black. I scraped and patted around what I thought was a door and scrambled along. As I jabbed and reached, as I searched, I felt my fingertip catch on something sharp, and my skin hooked on to whatever nail or splinter protruded. I felt the warm fluid spread and drip. As I felt the casing for the knob, I felt my fingernail pull off entirely. In my nearly crazed search for a way out, the dark hall seemed to lighten slightly. The sound was still screeching, crying, laughter constantly, escalating to the point I thought my ears might burst. I felt Jack hitting at me and looked where he was staring. Coming down the hall was something I think no mortal man was meant to see. It was distorted and terrible, flowing with a jerking quality simultaneously. I was suddenly captivated at the indescribable sight approaching. It was sinister, abhorrent, and mesmerizing. I knew if it reached us, all was lost. My hand found the knob that was freezing cold. I turned it. As we fell back with the door opening, I turned quickly to survey and found we were trapped in a closet. In a completely reactionary measure, I slammed the door just as the specter reached us. It roared with an intensity that seemed impossible. It slammed into the door with such violence that shards of wood, dust, and material blew out of the wall, spraying down on us. For an unknown but seemingly endless time, the torrent of anger and pure rage continued to pound upon the door, and I do not know how it did not breach it. At some point it stopped. If possible, the sudden silence was even more deafening. Jack continued to lay on the floor next to me as I lay curled in the fetal position. After an indeterminate amount of time, I began to notice a light coming from under the door. I thought it looked like sunlight. I moved over and tried to peer under. I could see what looked like daylight on the old red carpet. I looked and listened and could perceive nothing outside the door. I reached up and turned the knob. With a creak that was the defining noise of every haunted house ever, the door opened. The hallway was lit with the earliest rays of the beautiful morning sun. It was such a welcome sight to the soul-sucking pitch black of the previous night. As I took in the sunshine, movement in the hall caught my attention, and I recoiled back. The sunlight was just peeking over the horizon through the windows, leaving shadows in between each one. The far end of the hallway was bathed in darkness to the door and beyond. The terrible apparition was hovering just at this boundary of light and dark. It was almost too much for my mind, and I thought I might pass out. It screamed and raged against this boundary, seething and pacing back and forth. It seemed to strain with all its will until the last bit of darkness was abolished with the wonderful sunlight. There was an implosion of sound with some sort of vapor or smoke, and when it dissipated, there was a single sheet with 2 eye holes cut out, perched at the end of the hall where it had been. It seemed almost comical, a cruel and mocking reminder that it was not gone, not truly. We eventually came to the realization that we were able to escape the house only after we passed by the classic ghost. I felt taunted and bullied by it. I wanted to knock it over, but was so repelled by it, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I didn't and don't know what was under the sheet. We made our way through the house. There was no resistance. Windows were broken out, exterior doors left open, absent in some places. As we exited the house, we saw a passing police car and waved it down. The officer listened to both of us trying to relay the story, and he became suddenly very excited when he heard our names. We fell silent as he told us that we had been reported missing 6 days ago, and the entire town had been searching for us. Come to find out, the authorities had actually presumed us dead. My parents were out looking for me when I had seen them. My head beginning to spin was the last thing I remember that day. I'm not sure how many people believed us, if anyone. Jack and I drifted apart as I think both of us couldn't bear the memories of that night. Although thankfully, I have never had another experience such as this. I will never forget that ghost stories aren't always fun. Well, my spookies, now the pond has gone still again. The house has shut its door. The moon has slipped back behind the clouds, and somewhere out there, a punk zombie is probably still ruining somebody's evening. That's the fun of nights like this, isn't it? One moment you're standing at the edge of the ordinary world, and the next you're knee-deep in ghost water, sprinting through the woods from teeth and claws, or realizing far too late that the thing scratching at the walls isn't just the house settling. It never is. I hope you enjoyed this little parade of hauntings, howls, rot, and ruin. And if one of these tales follows you to bed tonight, well, that just means it liked you. Sleep tight, keep your windows locked, and maybe don't answer any voices calling from the dark water, or the tree line, or the upstairs hallway. And while you're at it, make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app so you never miss what's coming next, creeping into your feed, because every Wednesday we have a brand new scary story rising from the dark. Around here, the night always wants one more story, and it's not very picky about who ends up in it.